Hello, listeners. I'm Dee Hubei, and you're listening to The Real Deal with Dee and Denice. And I'm happy to announce that Denise is back with us today. Woo woo.
Yay.
And because we loved having her insights on the show so much, my amazing mother, Andrea Roberto, is joining us again today. Hi, Mom.
Hello.
So this episode was... She's funny. This episode was recorded on Friday, November 10th. As our listeners may know, Denise and I are both Army and Marine Corps veterans, respectively, and today is the United States Marine Corps' 248th birthday. So happy birthday, Marines. Yeah. And tomorrow, November 11th, is also Veterans Day. So thank you to all of our service members out there, but also a reminder that democracy and everything our veterans have fought for is at stake leading up to the 2024 election. So show your support to those who served by standing up for democracy and the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Thank you for your service, ladies.
Thank you for your support. All right, ladies. Today, we will cover the major impacts and takeaways from the results of the off-year election that took place on November 7th. But as you all know, the news changes day by day. So before we jump into the heart of our episode, I'm going to run through just a quick roundup of some news that we aren't going to be able to cover in today's episode. And then we'll jump right in. So first off, for re-election this term, but it looks like he may be putting a presidential bid in and a third party. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. It's only 66 days, actually, until ballots begin being cast for presidential primaries. And last but not least, there's a lot of developments with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict going on. Rashida Tlaib was censured, but we're going to do another short episode about that later so that we can make sure we give that topic the due diligence that it deserves. Okay, ladies, do you have anything you want to add on any of those points before we jump into the heart of our conversation?
There's just a lot in general that's happening in addition to all that. The whole entire world is on fire. Those things are scaring the hell out of me right now. I don't like what Israel is doing. I don't like what Palestine is doing. I don't like what's happening in Gaza. You got to be able to give educated, informed answers. Now everybody's at each other's throats. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, come on. We can't do this. Understand what you're doing here. Yes, I wish a ceasefire would happen this very second, because this is the slaughter. And I know we're going to get to that. Right. But I'm just saying, people, read a book, go do some research, understand what this conflict is about, and don't just throw stuff out there.
Yeah, time for a small plug. Deidre did a nice special on the history of the Israeli conflict. I don't have an episode number, but I'm sure you can find it.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, the MAGA world is already saying this recent election was tampered with. They're already screaming that it was rigged.
Oh man!
And this is what we got to look forward to in the next 12 months.
And we will be doing an episode on what will be the downfall of democracy if we do not, get it together and not be complacent when 2024 comes around. We're just under a year out from that right now.
And this one is the one.
It's going to be a defining election, absolutely. Hopefully, the issues that got voters to the polls this last Tuesday, which we'll cover in a little bit, or will still be a motivating factor in 2024. But we'll get to some of those nuances and complexities in a bit, though.
We have to do something about these Republicans, because you know that they are going to block what happened in Ohio. Yeah,
they are going to try.
Absolutely, they're going to try. They're going to try to block it.
They have a rough road.
It'll be easier for them to tamper with the recreational marijuana legalization because it's not a constitutional amendment the way that the abortion protection was. But they're still going to try and do that too. They've already. What were you saying?
They can still do all that bullshit too, like require the centers to have hallways as wide as a hospital and all that. They can still do all that though. So everybody stay on guard. It's not over in Ohio,
Well,
but at least they have it in the Constitution, and thank God.
Right. They can still
Good for
add
them.
undue burden to women who are seeking, reproductive health care. They can add undue burden to places like Planned Parenthood and other facilities that perform them. So it's not, like you said, it's not clear cut. Just because it's in the Constitution doesn't mean that they're not going to mess with it. So,
and of course, Texas Republicans have put in a law that women cannot use any of Texas street and highways to leave the state to go seek an abortion, or they're going to prison. You can't use
Texas is
any of their streets or highways to get in your car and drive on any of their streets or highways to go to another state to get an abortion, or you're going to prison.
enforce it. Come on, bring it.
yeah.
I want to see that.
And I'm sitting there going, please tell me how you're going to know. Are you going
Right.
to administer a pregnancy test to every woman that you see in a car driving? Is that what you're going to do?
Right. And I mean, do you guys know whatever happened to the law that I know it was like making its way to the Supreme Court, but basically when they were allowing people to sue for like $10,000 women who were seeking an abortion? You guys know what I'm
Oh,
talking about?
yeah, that one kind of went quiet. Yeah, it went pretty quiet,
I
but
think it
they
got
were doing
blocked.
that. Yeah,
Got
it
I think
blocked.
it
must.
got blocked.
I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to look and see what happened with that one because Florida was doing that too as well.
And I mean, even from their own standpoint, like this is what I mean about them wanting to cut their own nose off to spite their own face, because I know when they were doing that, Democrats were like, okay, then why don't we do this with guns?
Mm.
So
Yeah, that would be great.
obviously they didn't and aren't going to, because that's not how you should govern or be making these laws. But
Mhm.
if that's the precedent they want to set, this is the kind of things that they're opening themselves up to, and they do it anyway. So it's
Oh my
just,
God!
and
Just put me in a spaceship and just fly me to Neptune. I just every day it's just like it's something else. Like what? You actually telling a woman she cannot get in a vehicle and drive on any of the state streets or highways to leave to go to another state to. Okay,
But see,
and that's
again, that's not a law that makes sense that's written to actually work that way, that
right.
somebody will get in trouble for doing that. It's a law to make people afraid to try
Right.
to do it.
that's
That's what that's for.
that's
Seriously, like I said, I dare you. Figure out who I am, where I'm going, what I'm going there for. And I double dog dare you to try to prosecute me for that.
well, they would need a whole lot of pregnancy tests and have people standing out on the street for every time they saw a woman in a car.
Yeah, it doesn't even make
But
sense. It's
I don't. I just don't know what else to say. We have just.
Unless they're going to have like brown shirts that are going after women. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, what kind of world?
Hmm?
Yeah. And I don't know where I missed the memo about how that makes us more free. They want to talk about freedom all the time. I'm sorry, you're restricting my movements. What part of that sounds free to you? Because none of it sounds very free to me. No.
And
But
the masses eat that up because anything that seems to own the libs, even if it's something that would affect them too, that part just goes over their head.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes the libs mad. Oh, do it, do it, do it, do it. You know.
because we don't play by the rules. And that's, sometimes I appreciate that the Democrats play by the rules and do their best that they can to maintain some kind of moral compass in this atmosphere. But at some point,
But yeah.
if they're going to keep changing the rules and doing whatever they want, then we're going to have to do something eventually. Because
Well, this is why you keep getting all this crazy gerrymandering and stuff. The Democrats don't understand when you're in power, you need to use what's at your disposal while you have that power. Because when the other side get that power back, you could best believe they're going to do what they need to do. Because I still think they should have expanded that Supreme Court. They should have done it while he's in power because
I
they
promise
are.
you that if
It's terrible.
Republicans take over the Senate, they're getting rid of the filibuster.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
They're
All this
licking their
stuff
chops
about
over
how they
that.
would never get rid of it, they're going to get rid of it
Yes,
as soon
they
as they
are.
can.
Yes, they are.
If
And
they win the Senate.
Joe Manchin is leaving the Senate so he can pursue the presidency, and not just him. You know, Jill Stein has thrown her hat back in that ring again.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got Cornel West out there. You got all these people that have the capability to split that Democratic vote, And this is what just it infuriates me. And I mean, and it's like we living in a critical time, and this is why this is so scary leading up to this next 12 months, because looking at these so-called polls, they actually have this man defeating Biden in major swing states at this point.
However, in that same poll, Biden actually wins all 6 of those states if Trump gets convicted in one of his criminal cases. So obviously this New York civil fraud case is not a criminal case, but we are still watching the other 4 criminal trials that he has going on. And the first one's going to start March 6th. I doubt that, a ruling is going to come that quickly out of it, but in the most perfect of worlds, there could be a conviction by the end of April. So we'll see. But again, doesn't mean we should get complacent.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you what I have learned. You never get too old to learn. I have learned, especially with midterm last year, that you do not put all of your reliance on polls. Because from the time 22 came in, they started talking about this ginormous red wave. And I will admit, I was nervous from January 22 all the way up to November. This red wave, this is all you heard. Red wave, red. And look what happened on election day. And this is why I get people that will say to me, oh, things are going to look bad. And I tell them, I'm not going to listen to you naysayers. If everybody go and vote, and those who can volunteer in whatever way you can volunteer, go do that instead. And instead of running around like Henny Penny, Goosey Lucy, Dougie Lucky, and all of them talking about the sky falling, go do something. Because these polls sometimes it just whips people into a frenzy. And then it makes other people so discouraged that they say, what is the point of me voting? My side is going to lose anyway. So my one vote is not going to matter. And I've seen that happen personally. I've seen people do that.
I know. And Obama was losing to Romney a year before that election.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say also that, especially, on the left, we're really afraid now because 2016, we did not expect the outcome that we got.
PTSD.
Yeah. But actually, the polls were pretty accurate the past several cycles, including when they were talking about red wave. And that was a lot of that panic, and it made a lot of people freak out. But again, I don't want people to get complacent. So I'd rather us be more freaked out than, feeling more comfortable. So at the end of the day,
Yeah, we should never get complacent and comfortable. But my thing is, the media the media sometimes, and it depends on where you get your information from too. Will have people. I'm thinking about these people that I work with because I was working with Common Defense during that time, and we were doing a lot of things with voting and get out the vote drive and all this, and it was just too many people saying, I'm not even going to bother because they already show us losing. So why should I put in the effort if they've already gerrymandered these districts, and no matter if I vote or not, my vote's not going to count because I live in a heavily gerrymandered district, blah, blah, blah. And it was at the point where I just heard so many people say that. And this is why I try to tell people, act like polls don't exist. Don't put your reliance on the polls say. Go and vote. Just go vote. That's just it. That's what's going to be the determining factor at the end of all of this, is when they tally those votes. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes the difference. And we just gotta stay focused. We gotta stay laser focused on this one, and just go out there and do what we need to do. And if you can volunteer, if you have the time, volunteer phone bank, text bank, your local precinct, volunteer. You'll feel so much better and not feel so hopeless. That feel like you're making a difference. Volunteer to drive people to the polls.
Like-minded people too that
can
kind of
stay connected to like-minded people. It's important. It's important because this one is critical. Honestly, I know all of them are important, but this one is critical because we definitely we're on the verge of losing our democracy. And when we say we're hanging on by a thread at this point, we really are. And it seems that even if Donald Trump is not the president, if he don't run in the actual president's next election cycle, we got Republicans in office that look like they want to get rid of our democracy. So it's not just him,
Right.
you know. So we have a fight in front of us in general. So we need to do something about flipping those seats in our Congress as well, and not just focus on the presidency.
Yeah. But speaking of flipping seats, that will lead us right into the heart of our conversation today, talking about the off year elections that took place this week on November 7th, Tuesday, November 7th. The Virginia legislature was able to earn the majority in both their state house and their state senate.
Good
So
job,
Glenn
Virginia.
will not be putting his weird
Yay.
agenda forward. There will be no 15-week abortion ban there. So that's exciting. And speaking of where we can glean some information from when polls aren't that helpful, we can glean a little bit of insight, at least from these polls too. Of course, we have to keep in mind that the electorate is going to be very different that comes out in 2024 than would have come out in this off-year election. So that is something to keep in mind. But we did learn a lot of key insights, specifically that abortion is a really, really motivating factor still, even 18 months after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And if you follow politics like we all do, then you know that 18 months is a long time for people's political memory. So for something to still be salient all this time later and driving people to the polls is a really promising thing. But again, complacency here.
That's right. That's right. I was very, to tell you the truth, I was very encouraged by everything that happened this past Tuesday, because I didn't know what to expect. So Ohio and Kentucky and Virginia made me very hopeful. And I got to say that I was very extremely pleased with Kentucky because, not just because Governor Bashir was reelected, but because Donald Trump's guy lost. And, he just didn't know what to say. Now he's saying it's because he couldn't wipe the stench of Mitch McConnell from him, and that's why he lost. And I'm like, guy, no. People just didn't
the
want
stench, sir.
Right. It's you. You don't get it, do you? It's you. But that was just great. In Ohio, thank you, Ohio. Thank you, Ohio. Thank you. Because I believe that if they would put the abortion issue on the ballot in every state, I think every state would overturn that. Every state would go for it. They would be like, yes, keep it there.
Not every state allows them, but Pennsylvania
not every state allows
does.
referendum. Pennsylvania does, yes. And Pennsylvania is a big battleground state in 2024. And it looks like we might be putting that on our ballot in 2024. So alongside the president.
I don't know what to say about my state. Because
North Carolina.
They have gerrymandered the whole life out of the state. And we got a super majority now because we had that turncoat. I really believe something needs to be done about that. Since we're on this
totally
subject,
agree.
Something's got to be done about that. You cannot run and steal people's money and votes as one party, running in one party, and the minute you get elected, you go jump to the other side, because to me that's theft and fraud. People
100%.
volunteer. They knock on doors for you. They raise
100%.
money for you. They do all of this stuff for you. And then you go run and jump to the other side.
Yeah.
And this woman ran on the abortion issue for women's rights and everything.
I know.
And now you are a staunch Republican just like that.
Right. And we're not saying you can't change your mind, you can't have, ideological changes. But what I am saying is that you definitely can't change that in the same term that you ran for on a completely different platform. If you want to change your mind, go ahead. Do that next time. Run your next campaign on your new ideology and, be honest with the voters as a Republican and do it that way. But you cannot, as an elected official who campaigned on all of those things, then go into office and completely do the opposite thing that the people put you there to do. You were there to do the people's work, not your own work.
Absolutely. And it was just, it's painful to listen to some of the people who were interviewed about that, that talked about the work they put in to have her elected, to that district, only for her to pretty much just spit in their faces. And, it was just painful listening to them because they believed in her, and this happened all around the country. And it's the same thing with people like Cinema and all of them that did the same thing. There should be something, some kind of punitive they should have to pay punitively for doing that, because you know in your mind what you're doing and what you're going to do when you steal these people's votes and their money. You should have to pay some kind of way.
I think
And I'm sorry.
I think the mayor of Dallas just did the
Yes,
same thing, right?
yes,
He
yes.
was
Mayor of
elected,
Dallas did the same
and then the
thing.
next, right after election day, he changed to
He
be
sure did.
Republican.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But that's the only way Republicans can win anymore, because they know
Low
that
down, dirty
their
pigs.
policies are so crazy that they can't win just outright. They're just not going to get what they need to just outright win. They got to lie, cheat, and steal, and that's the only way they're going to get into office. And so they're losing. I heard a man say yesterday, and he's a Republican. They said, "Would you, if it comes down to Trump and Biden in 24, will you just stay home?" He said, "No." He said, "I'm going to vote in 24 for Joe Biden." He says, "No matter what." And I am a Republican. He said, "I would never vote for Donald Trump." And so, and then there's a lot of people that have been on the Trump train for a long time now are saying, "I just cannot do it." In good faith, after seeing what he has done to this country, I cannot vote for him. So I hope there's still a lot more of those people out there.
Me too.
Yeah, we have to hope. And it just, because Republicans really just like to change when they can't win the game, they change the rules of the game. I mean, speaking about this Ohio election, so just to give like the listeners a background, so we know that there was two issues on their ballot that were really big. One was abortion protection, so to enshrine in their state constitution at about 23 weeks, abortion protections up till about 23 weeks. But to even get to this space, you have to rewind to August. And now in August, the state legislature in Ohio said that they don't do elections in August because, people aren't around. It's just not a good time to do it. But then they changed their little rules. They wanted to hold a special election in August. And on that ballot, what they were looking for was to change the threshold of what percentage of citizens of that state needed to vote for something for it to get passed. So normally it takes a simple majority. So they were looking to raise that threshold to a supermajority, which was just a couple percentage points higher than what the abortion protections were polling at. So they tried to put in a sneaky little election in August in a time that they said is not a good time to have elections, to raise the threshold, to change the rules of the game so that it took more people above the polling numbers to be able to get and it passed with 57%. So it wouldn't, had they been successful in August in changing that threshold and in changing the rules of the game, which they were not because the voters were not fooled, they would not have been able to get their abortion protection despite 57% of the state voting for that.
Exactly right.
Wow.
And to your point too, Denise, about how if states did have referendums everywhere and we were able to put this on the ballot in every state, I mean, in all the states that we've seen this happen already, so Ohio was the 7th state to do it. So 3 other states that were Democrat and 3 states that were traditionally Republican went and did it. So on the Democratic side, they were looking to enshrine abortion rights, and they all passed. Then on the Republican side, there's 3 red states that took up the issue. But in the red states, what they were voting on was to outlaw abortion in their states. And all of those lost. So all 7 of these states that have taken it up, whether on the side of enshrining the protections or stopping them taking the rights away, the right to abortion and abortion access prevailed every time so far, even in these deep red states like Kansas. So it's obviously an issue that transcends polarization, which is incredible because there's not a lot of things that do that.
Not much does.
These days.
No, you're absolutely right about that one.
And I mean, so if we return to Kentucky, as we mentioned, Kentucky has a Democratic governor who was reelected, Andy Beshear, and he won this time in a state where Trump won in 2020 by 26 points.
Yes,
And he
yes.
won by 5 points
Right.
That was
this time.
impressive.
But when he originally won was when Trump ran. He only won by like half a percentage point or something. And this time on his reelection, won by 5 points. So that was a
That's very encouraging,
Mhm.
and it's impressive. I think
Yeah,
people are showing
I
they're
mean,
getting tired of MAGA.
yeah, but he's also very popular in the state because
Mm-hmm.
he's a good governor, but also because his father was governor, and it's just a very big name recognition,
Mm-hmm.
like respected family name
Mm-hmm.
in the state. So that helped him a little bit. But yeah,
that definitely helped
that's
him, but the
fantastic.
voters just love him. They call
Yeah.
him Andy. They think he's
Hmm.
personable. There's some data to suggest that he did even better in states that or in parts of his state that were affected by like climate change, like flooding and disasters, natural disasters, because he was really prevalent in those areas. He went there all the time, showed his face, talked to the
Hmm.
residents. And that really gained a lot of support for him too. I'm not saying his name recognition didn't play a role; it definitely
Right.
Hmm.
did, but
It certainly helped,
his
but
own actions
right.
definitely played a role, and you can tell by the 4.5 point jump from 2020 to him winning again this time. His own popularity obviously propelled him a bit, I think, this time. Um, but that 5 point margin that we were talking about, that this time he won by 5 points in that race, it's interesting how sometimes 5 points is a lot and sometimes it's a little. Like in the
Yep.
context
Hmm.
of that state, that's like a blowout. Like, I can't believe this Democratic governor won by 5 points. But then when you look at Mississippi, we did not win the governorship in Mississippi, but we came in within 5 points, which is incredibly close considering the context of Mississippi, because there was no way that in the past we would have gotten anywhere near close to a 5 point margin. So, if we
I
can
will
keep on
also
this trend,
say Tate Reeves's Democratic opponent, who was the cousin of Elvis Presley,
yep,
was pro-life, and I think
yep,
if he were pro-choice, he might have won that race.
yep.
And then they ran out of ballots too
Hmm.
in a heavily black
Yeah,
district.
they sure
Hmm.
did. Hines County, which is like 70% black population in that county, because of course they're doing their tomfoolery in a county that has that kind of demographics. They ran out of ballots within the first 2 hours, and then people were in line for so long. And then the Democratic Party like filed a petition or whatever to keep the polls open for people who were already in line so that they could still vote, because they got there on time. They had been waiting in line, but the deadline was going to pass before they were going to get to the front of the line to be able to vote. So to make sure these people's voices were heard, the Democratic Party filed a motion to keep the polls open later. And at the same time, the Republicans immediately appealed it and said, absolutely no, no way, stop, and wanted to shut the voting down. So don't tell me both the parties are the same. One of them is actively trying to make sure voices are heard, and the other is actively trying to suppress them. Bingo bango. That's
Absolutely.
the example right there, you
And
know?
because there's no consequences. I'm sorry, on the GOP side, this thing with Tate Reeves and Brett Favre and all of them, nobody is being held accountable for that. There's just no accountability. This is the difference in the two parties. The Democrats are quick to do something about Democrats that do things that are criminal or wrong or whatever, whether that's censure or whatever the case is. Republicans are like, we need to see, we need this person to stay in power. We're not. Are you kidding me? We know that she just killed her husband last night, but hey, she's staying right here. We need that seat, and she's going to stay right here. This is what kind of stuff they do. This is why so many people. I listen. My son and my son and my nephews, these are young millennials, and my nephew is a Gen Z. I listen to these young people, and they say things like, when we look at all of this criminality that goes on with these politicians, why should we care about what happens? Because they're criminals. But look at what they do and don't get in any trouble for it. They do, and I mean, they take our money and they just do things, and every little or no accountability. And what are you supposed to say to them? Because this is stuff that's out in the open. This is not stuff that's hidden. They see it, and I say, wow. Well, you still have to do the right thing, especially because you're a person of color. But nevertheless, I mean, come on, look at this Tim Scott thing. That right there had me laughing. I've been laughing for the last 24 hours because the Republicans have been telling Tim Scott, the donors have been threatening to withhold money if he don't produce a woman. Okay, because they didn't want him to be an unmarried, quote unquote, president, because there's never been an unmarried president before. So, okay. So they pretty much saying, you don't produce a wife, we ain't giving you no more money. So Timmy produced a girl yesterday named Mindy. He brought her out on the stage. When I tell you this
How
guy
humiliating.
wasn't it? You saw that.
I didn't, but I heard about it. Yeah.
He was. If that was me, and he was handling me like he was, I would have walked off that stage and said, I can't pretend no more. Y'all, this is fake. We're not together. He's doing this so his donors can keep giving him money. I would have just told the truth. The man he looked so uncomfortable with that lady. Like, but this is where they are. They telling him, oh, you're supposed to be the party. Your party of morals and values got left at the Beetlejuice thing. Okay? You're done with the morals and values thing. Forget it.
And their morals and values are just fake anyway. So they had the third GOP debate on Wednesday night. And Tim Scott's on the stage on the GOP debate, and he's talking about banning abortion, federal bans. And meanwhile, if we look back at Ohio, so we know already now that Ohio enshrined that in their constitution, which was a good time for them to do it because their Supreme Court in Ohio was just about to take up a case about the 6-week abortion ban. So obviously that's going to get thrown out the window now because it's against their state constitution. But it's also in Ohio. You guys might remember the story of the 11 or 12-year-old child.
Yes,
who
from
was
Ohio.
raped by her family member.
10. She was 10.
Mm-hmm.
She was 10. Oh, okay. So a 10-year-old who was raped by a family member that she was supposed to be able to trust and had to leave her state and go somewhere else to be able to get an abortion. Don't talk to me about morals, sanctity of life, that you care about anything if you are just A-okay with a 10-year-old who was raped and assaulted having to go to such extreme lengths and all of this undue burden in order to free herself of that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, and you want to cut Social Security, you want to cut Medicaid, you want to cut SNAP, you want to cut WIC. I mean, it's a lie.
It is. It is.
That's totally otherwise because none of the data backs that up.
Well, you had a woman who came out and they were talking about that very thing about the little girl who got pregnant and needed abortion. She said the female body was designed to carry a baby. That's what she said. The female body was designed to carry the female body, a woman's body maybe, but even a woman gets to decide to make that decision for herself. Nobody else gets to make that decision. But this little girl, who probably just recently started her own menstrual cycle at 10, she probably just started it, and already you got to have a baby forming in your body, and anybody who's had a child knows how childbirth is traumatic in and of itself. I was 19 when I got pregnant with my first child, 20 when I gave birth. That I swore I would never do it again ever as long as I kept breath in my body because it was so traumatic, right? But I was 20.
A C-section, so I didn't have to go. Dee was a C-section, so I didn't have to go through labor.
See, and then I know C-sections are not great either, but that vaginal thing, oh my God.
I didn't have to do
that. And then I'm saying, I can imagine being 10. I was 20. So I couldn't imagine being 10.
And and then you look at places like Florida. And Florida,
I don't care if she has her period or not. That doesn't mean her body is capable of carrying a pregnancy to term.
No.
You know,
Can you imagine how
could have been
tiny
a
she
million
is?
problems aside from the fact that it shouldn't even be an issue.
Right. And I mean, people died in childbirth all the
Thank you.
time when you look
Every
at back
day.
in history, constantly. And the ones who were young were at an extra high risk of dying or having severe complications because their bodies were not really developed enough to be able to carry
Absolutely.
these children just because they were menstruating at the time. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And even if that were true, which it's absolutely not, we can look at places like Florida, and they put that law out where they were like, okay, well, before they did their 6 week ban and stuff, as they were like inching their way towards it, and they were like, okay, well, if a child under 18 wants to have an abortion, then they need to take some kind of like litmus test to prove that they're mature enough to be able to have an abortion and to make the decision to have an abortion. Excuse me. If they're not mature enough to make that decision, do you think they're mature enough to raise another human being? I mean,
Right.
right. And if you're 10 years old, I mean, I don't care how great of a family you have and how great of a kid you are. You cannot be the best parent ever if you were 10 years old because you need a parent still.
Yeah.
I
10.
mean,
You can't be any kind of a parent at 10. I mean, come
I
on.
know I saw one where there was an 11-year-old girl that gave birth. I don't know what state it was in, but when she was going through labor pains and everything, she was in the hospital. This baby was yelling for her own mother. She was calling for her
yeah.
mom every time she got hit with a contraction, and here she is giving birth to a baby. And it was rape. It was her uncle who had raped her and impregnated her, and I'm just thinking, I can't even imagine an 11-10 11-year-old body going through that, because I remember what I went through at 20, and so it's really it's just terrible. And I'm glad that I hope Ohio has set a precedent going into 24 with the states that will put that on their ballot or contemplating putting that on their ballot. And I hope more states do it,
Me too.
Yeah.
because I was so super disappointed in our Supreme Court. But I knew when Amy Coney Barrett was put on that Supreme Court, I knew we were headed down that road.
She's a
I knew it.
handmaiden. And it's not a
Yeah,
joke.
she, for real, realistically, that's what she is.
Yes, People
I
of
knew
Praise is
it
the
wouldn't happen.
organization she's a part of, and they have the titles of handmaiden, of which she had held. And
Absolutely.
that is the religious organization, I guess you could call it, that the Handmaid's Tale is based off of. So
Oh,
not a joke,
great.
not a false alarm. And and they can also really get out of my face with this, oh well, they can adopt thing. Okay, well, first of all, we've already just covered how dangerous it is to be pregnant, to give birth in general, but we haven't talked about how expensive it is. It's like, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars just to give birth, even if you weren't going to keep the child, even if you were going to give it up for adoption. Who's paying those bills? Because this is the same party that's not giving us health care, wants to strip Obamacare, which isn't even enough coverage to begin with. And I mean, and the charges are obscene. If you look at bills that come out of labor and delivery, there is this charge on there called skin to skin contact. And I don't
Yep.
care if it was $1. Why is somebody paying to hold the
Oh, the
child
baby.
you just gave birth to? I mean,
How was that? How was that given the doctors, saying that's something that the doctor should be compensated for, the hospital should be compensated for, anybody else, just to place a baby on your chest? You're right. Just to get that Tylenol or that painkiller that costs $150 for one tablet. I
Yeah.
mean, really. But you're right. And adoption, you know how many children are in adoption centers that never get adopted because there's so many of them?
yeah,
They're telling lies, because I watched so many of them at these rallies. We'll take your baby, holding up these signs. We'll adopt your child. Quit lying. No, you won't.
right. Then why are there all
No, you
these
won't.
kids that are there? And most of them age out.
I was
So
just
that
going to say
means that
that. They end up aging
they
out. Yep.
right, exactly.
Hmm.
So that means that they
Hmm.
become older than 18 without ever getting adopted, and the outcomes for those kids are really sad. Like their educational outcomes, their job outcomes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much every aspect when you look at their outcomes, they are nowhere near compared to their peers who were not
And then
in
you
the
think
foster
about the
care system.
mental and emotional toll it takes on them that nobody wanted them. They age out of the system. Nobody ever adopted them. They really don't have any, close family or just feel like they're not wanted. And so it takes a toll on them. And it's a bad thing. So they're lying when they're out there holding up those signs. And for
Right.
anybody that believes that, oh, you just carry your baby to term, somebody will adopt your child. It's a lie. It's a lie. They're always lying to people.
Yep.
Yeah.
On a happier note, though, while we're still on Ohio, issue two was the legalization of recreational marijuana use in the state, and that passed also at 57%. It was not a constitutional amendment, but it still passed on referendum, and that makes Ohio the 25th or 26th state to legalize it recreationally across the country. And we know
Tipping
just
point.
from Yep, we know from historical data that once you reach about the halfway point, about 25 states, that's when you see movement on that issue, whatever it may be, on the federal level. So we may expect to see some kind of movements on a federal legalization bill in some point soon. So we'll be watching that space. On another kind of cool and interesting note, Yusuf Salam, who's one of the exonerated five
Oh
from,
yes,
you guys remember he was
yes,
one of the five people. Trump took out a whole page in the New York Times
Yes.
ad about the
That's when they were
Central
the
Park.
Central Park Five. Yeah.
Yeah. But now they're the exonerated five, and he won a city council seat this week, so that's
yes.
cool. Um, in Pennsylvania, we had a really big, important Supreme Court justice race for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. It was between Carolyn Carluccio and Dan McCaffrey. Dan McCaffrey was pro choice, endorsed by Planned Parenthood, whereas Carluccio, um, she's no exceptions, pro life, no exceptions. She was endorsed by places that the Southern Poverty Law Center called extremist organizations, but she lost, and she lost by a pretty decent margin. I think it was still single digits, but I think it was on the closer side of 10. Um, so that was very cool. We know that Virginia flipped the state legislature, which was great. And I know this was one of my mom's favorite things. Mom, do you want to tell us about Moms for Liberty or Planned Parenthood?
Planned Parenthood. That was my favorite tweet of the week. Um, uh, there were, well, I was specifically talking about Johnson County. They wanted to take over a school board there, and they lost
In
every
Iowa.
single seat. Oh, Johnson, Iowa, right? Every single seat to a progressive candidate. But
Yeah.
when Deidre and I were talking about that story, we learned that they actually ran like 130 of them around the country.
Yep.
Moms for Liberty, for whoever doesn't know, is a terrible organization. They are, I think they're either a hate or an extremist organization by the ACLU, or they're even the Southern SPLC, maybe, yeah, Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah. I think both, but
and they are terrible. They're the ones they were the ones who started screaming in the school meetings about masks. Can't have masks in
Mhm.
school. Don't put my kid in a mask. Freedom, blah blah.
yeah.
And then that
Yeah, they
morphed
originated to
into
stop
banning all the
COVID
books.
restriction. Yeah. And then sorry, Mom. Yeah, and then they moved on to anti-LGBTQ stuff, book banning, don't say gay in schools, all that kind of stuff. But to your point, Mom, they ran 130 candidates that they endorsed around the country. 92% of them lost. So only 10 out of the 130 candidates they endorsed won. Um, every single candidate they endorsed in Minnesota, Kansas, North Carolina, so good on your state, and Washington all lost their race, every single one of them. Only 1 out of 14 was elected in Iowa altogether, not Johnson County though. 1 out of 6 in Virginia, 5 out of 25 in Ohio, and 4 out of 19 in New Jersey. So there's your 10. So
Yay.
Good to know. Good to know there. I'm happy that the voters showed up. Yeah, so we have good news on the horizon, but I can only say for the 50 millionth time, let's not get complacent. The electorate will definitely be different when we head into the 2024 election,
Yeah,
and I'm
no
sure
doubt.
we'll cover that.
I am so happy about that because those women, I can't even articulate what I think when I see them because it would not be nice and we would get shut down off the airwaves.
Yeah, they're gross. They're really gross.
I this book banning thing is the most diabolical thing I ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It's really it's diabolical.
Hmm.
I mean, because these books been around forever and they have harmed no one. And all of a sudden they just coming out of nowhere saying, toss it, toss it, toss it, toss it,
Right.
toss it. And these parents, yes, parents should be involved in their children's education. And I'm not saying that they should know what their children are learning, so on and so forth, but you don't get to run the schools.
Hmm.
I worked in the
Hmm.
school system in North Carolina, Wilson County, for 15 years, and we never had parents coming in there taking over our classrooms and telling us what to teach and what not to teach. We
Right.
never had that.
Right.
We had parent teacher conferences. They knew we had an exchange of ideas. Parents would say, okay, what can I do to help if their child is struggling? This is what you can do to help your child at home. This is where we came together. When we had school board meetings, some of the parents would come there. They would listen to what was said, but we never had parents to come and take over our school board meetings. And there certainly wasn't a whole lot of shouting and cursing and acting wild and crazy.
Hmm.
What happened to those days? Where did that shift happen?
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
with this book banning and Trump calling journalists enemies of the people, I mean, if you've not read George Orwell's 1984 or Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, might be a good time to check them out because that's where we're headed.
We're definitely headed there.
We
Definitely.
just gotta head it off at the pass. That's all.
It's a shame, but there was a black pastor I was listening to, watching on TikTok the other day, that was saying one of the things that they're starting to do at his church is start teaching Black history in at the church because
Taking it out of the
I
street.
think that it's just sinful for Black students not to know their history because somebody is saying we don't want kids to know about the horrors of slavery because we want everybody to think the country is wonderful, and the country is wonderful to some degree, but we came, things happened, and we need to, you're taking our history away. Things that all haven't always been like it is today. It led up, we had to go through some things to get where we are today.
Mhm.
And in order for our kids to appreciate that we did come out of something, they have to know what we came out of to be appreciated, to be able to appreciate where we are, and that we still got some ways to go because they're trying to take us backwards, if you want to be real
No
about it.
doubt. No doubt about it.
No doubt. No
So
doubt.
but if you telling us no, we're not going to teach that at all. So we're just going to say where we are today is how it's always been in this country. There's never been anything different than what you see today. It's not fair. So, and I can appreciate him trying to do that, but my thing is, if a child go back to school and say to the teacher, well, that's not true, or this is what happened because slavery happened, this and this happened during those days, and that there's going to be a consequence for the child, or his or her parents, so we're just in a weird day, in our education. And we know that we lost a lot of things during COVID, and we fell behind. The United States fell behind terribly during that time. And then it doesn't help that you're mistreating the teachers. We got teachers going out the door like crazy. I saw teachers at the beginning of this school year on different videos quitting the first week of school. They just outright quit. They said, I cannot take this. All this micromanaging, and then for some of the behavior from the students as well, but the micromanaging from the district, from the administration, all the disrespect of teachers. You already don't pay enough, and these teachers are walking out the door. What's going to happen to our students? How are kids going to get, how are they going to get educated?
Again, pushing good faith actors out of it. We were talking about it with, the voting polls, for example, but now you see the same thing with teachers. Now teachers who are good faith actors don't want to participate in this anymore because they're afraid. They're constantly under scrutiny. They could get fired because they teach history too correctly. I mean, so
Read
then
the
you're going
wrong
to have
book.
these people, right?
Yes.
You're going to have these people not want to participate. Then who's participating? What, PragerU is going to be all of the teachers in the country? I mean, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, thinks that we should have prayer in school and should not be allowed to teach evolution.
Listen.
And says that evolution is the reason for school shootings.
I am a practicing Christian, but let me tell you something. I believe in prayer. All the praying that's been going on has not stopped the school shooting yet. So there's also a scripture in the Bible that says faith without works is dead.
That's right.
So when you pray, and these people up in Congress claim to be praying, that's your faith, that praying. But your works is to put some legislation to go along with that prayer, which would help some of this stuff. When you got people that are diagnosed with mental illnesses in the military, and they come out of they're discharged out in the military with various mental illnesses, but you say, oh no, we're not going to stop that person from being able to buy a firearm. Why on earth not? Not just military, but anybody that's diagnosed. But you say, no, that's not enough to stop them from buying a firearm. That man that went and shot up all those people in Maine. Case in point. No, it's not. We know he's crazy, but no, he could go buy all the guns he wants. Please, can somebody explain that to me? Maybe
and
it's
again,
my
this
brain.
Is not caring about what their voters want. I mean, background checks, universal background checks, for example,
what's wrong with that?
Gun laws, they are popular. The majority of Americans want them, even Republicans. But you don't see any elected Republican taking up action to do that because they're not in it for their voters. They're in it for themselves.
Mention that. Let me tell you what somebody said to me. He's a staunch conservative. So one day on Facebook, I was talking about common sense gun laws because I go off every time there's a mass shooting. I go off. Okay. And I mentioned common sense gun laws. Now, he never interacts with me unless I say something that's anti-conservative. And then here he comes every time. And he says, Denise, what is common sense gun laws? And I just, I had to really sit and think, do I answer him or not? Because it would be hard for me not to really flip out on him. You know what common sense gun laws are. And I talked about universal background checks. I talked about not letting people that have clear diagnosis of mental illness should not be able to get their hands on a firearm. Just things like that. And he was just kind of debating me about that, like most of the Republicans do. And I started to just delete and block this fool. Like, you gotta be kidding me.
But again, like when things suit their needs, though, look at the Hunter Biden stuff. The Republicans are all up in arms about how he, had an illegal possession of a firearm because he indicated no in a checkbox on a federal form, stating that he, wasn't using any illicit substances at the time, though he was, and he never did anything with this weapon, but his possession of it and lying on that form was illegal. And they're all up in arms about it. And I'm not saying that was a right thing to do. I'm just saying, again, the hypocrisy, because you either have to care about it or you don't. If you don't want those kinds of people to have weapons, then you don't let all of these people not have weapons, not just your political enemies.
Right.
But
I'll never understand what is our fascination with guns over the lives of people. But when I knew that this country was in trouble, Newtown, Sandy Hook said it all, because it was that year that I was teaching first grade. 6-year-olds, just like the ages of and the kids that got killed at Sandy Hook. And when it was all thoughts and prayers, after those children went and had their faces blown off, I knew that this country, that we were in trouble.
Yeah.
Nobody seemed moved by that. As far as our lawmakers, that is. They didn't seem moved by that.
Ones anyway.
Not the Republican ones, because President Obama did go, and I felt so bad for him. He interacted with his parents. But the Republicans, Thoughts and prayers.
Sandy Hook was one of the first times that I think it's the first time, at least the first time that I remember watching the news and crying. I mean, I was fairly young. I'm 26 now, so I was probably like 16 or 15 in high school at the time. And like I had paid attention to things, but I wasn't like an avid news viewer and stuff. But when that happened, it was like a big deal in our household. My mom and I were sitting on the couch and we were watching it. And that's the first time I can remember crying when I was watching the news. I've done it quite a few times since, though.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you're thinking about little kids to where I remember one of the mothers talked about how, I won't even say what she had to do with the condition of her child, but, we had to do a drill one time and I had to get all of the kids had to get half the kids under a table. The other teacher in the class had to take the other half. And the drill seemed so real that the kids were almost like pulling my clothes off of me because they were holding on, so tight. And, I had to tell them, it's a drill, so that they don't, they were so scared. And my mind was saying to me, if this was real, what could I do to save these babies? What could I do? There's nothing that I could do to save these babies for real. Being under a table.
Right.
And that goes back to our conversation a minute ago about teachers, and that's a real risk that they have to think about when they go to become a teacher. How am I going to protect these kids if an active shooter comes in here? Most of them put their own lives on the line defending these kids because,
That's right.
I mean, and
this
I know
is
that
why we need an overturn in our government.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that it's just another testament to how we have changed and how lobbyists have such an impact on where we are. Like if you go back to the 99 when Columbine happened, we passed an assault weapons ban. We passed gun legislation. The problem was we put a time limit on it. And during that time, the NRA backed these candidates that didn't believe in any kind of gun reform or gun legislation. They put tons of money into this campaign to get that stuff. And then when the time came up, we didn't renew it. And now we're here. And now look at all of the school shootings that have been happening. And I mean, there's definitely an uptick. Then there was definitely less gun violence during the time that the laws after Columbine were in effect. And that was a bipartisan move. And you don't have that kind of bipartisanship now.
No,
so,
Ronald.
They don't even want you to talk about it.
Ronald Reagan, Deidre's mortal enemy. You're going to hate this, Deidre. Is personally responsible for the passage of the assault weapons ban because it was after he was shot and it was really close. It was going to be a really super close vote. They didn't think they had the votes. And I forget who they were, but he wrote a personal letter to 2 or 3 different Republican senators and stressed to them how important this was and that it really needed to pass and that he personally would like for them to do that for him and blah, blah, blah. And they did. And it passed by 1 vote.
Wow. Well, he is my mortal enemy. But credit where credit is due.
But, right.
But I mean,
it is what it is.
I want that. We should have had that.
But it took him getting shot.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It's these
it
people
shouldn't have
no
to happen
empathy.
to you for you to care.
Right. It had to happen to him before, and that was the Brady law came about.
That's the Brady bill. That was the assault weapons ban.
The Brady bill. And it's like, and to me, I think that's what it's going to take for some kind of gun legislation. It's going to take a member of Congress or, God forbid, somebody in their family, as long as
Steve Scalise was gunned down on a softball field. They didn't care.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But maybe, I mean, like if it's I guess I don't know what it's going to take because the NRA just really has a death grip on them. Like they just cannot. They cannot deviate from that. They've taken too much money from it. They're beholden. And they just can't. And it's a shame that people's lives are at stake. Here, you can't even go downtown to your favorite restaurant or whatever you're going downtown for, sit outside and have a drink or whatever it is that people do because people are just popping off guns everywhere because North Carolina is got one of those really, really, really lax gun laws now, where they was like, oh, you don't need a permit anymore to purchase a gun, or you don't need this, you don't need that anymore. Just go and get you a gun, everybody, and have fun.
It's just so gross.
No
Well,
end in sight.
I can't with the hypocrisy and and it's
No.
and the race-based violence too. I mean, we were talking about domestic terrorism earlier, and that's exactly what some of this is as well. I mean, you talk about the Buffalo shooting in New York. That guy wrote a whole
Yes.
manifesto because he wanted, this is in his words, he wanted Black people to feel safe nowhere, not in a place of worship, not at their grocery store. I mean, that's what terrorism is. That's what the definition of terrorism is that people do
Absolutely.
not feel safe going about their regular business in their everyday lives.
They are getting so bold. I see it all the time. One of the things that Trump successfully did, he certainly didn't usher in racism. It's always been here. But what he did embolden them to stand on who they are and not shrink back. If this is how you think, let the world know you think that way. When he came down the escalator and said that Mexicans are rapists and murderers, he opened that door right then. And they've been taking that thing to heart ever since. And I worry about that when I'm in public because I see some of that behavior even in the stores. And I often say, I just hope it never happens to me. But they want to put him back in office and give him the nuclear code.
And give him the
He's a
nuclear
stable
code.
genius.
Oh my God.
Stable genius
He's a
after
stable-
all.
He's a stable
He has
genius that knows words, many words, beautiful
The
words.
best words. The
The
best
best
words.
words. Many, many, very, very. That's exceeding his vocabulary.
He just gets worse and worse. And for anyone to talk about Biden's mental incapacity is so beyond me if you just listen to anything.
That's what
comes out.
angers me. Now, yes, Joe Biden looks like he's getting a little tired and his steps are getting a little slower, but his brain ain't on the level of Donald Trump's.
Right. All of the people around him, like, all the aides, I'm not just talking like super loyalists either, just like the people that are around Biden in general. Some of them have said those things that, like, sure, he is getting a bit older. He may, not talk with as much enthusiasm as he used to before. He may walk a little bit slower, but have absolutely zero indication of any kind of mental decline.
I think he's still sharp. You can ask him any questions. When he take questions from the press, he answers those questions in full sentences. He don't stammer and stutter. Like, excuse me, like he has no idea what he's talking about.
And you can count on him for a good gaffe every now and then, but that's been true for decades. That has nothing to do with him being old.
Oh no, that's just his, like you said, it's his personality. But I think he's still sharp. I mean, he's got good people around him. The people that he put in his cabinet are people who are qualified to be in those positions compared to Trump, who put people who had no qualifications to be in the roles that they were in. Most of them couldn't even get security clearances to be where they were supposed to be.
Well,
he put loyalists in those roles.
And now that you say that too, that's another huge danger of him winning again, because the people that he's going to have in his cabinet and stuff, he's not going to mess around with Reince Priebus and like those kind of, sort of semi-normie Republicans. You know what I mean? He'll have Mike Flynn back in there.
Mike Flynn should have a long time ago been called into some sort of a hearing.
He was, and convicted. And then he got pardoned.
And he got the pardon, but he should have been stripped of his rank. He should be stripped of his retirement.
Right.
This is what I mean. He should be stripped. Yeah. Because the stuff that he's done, and he's still drawing military retirement, and you're running around here against the military, against the government, and you're drawing government money,
right?
And see, this is the kind of stuff that needs to be addressed. Oh, and Steve Bannon is getting ready to go back. For he's saying, he's been appealing his mess, but he's getting ready to go back into his hearing soon, next week or something like that. He ain't served that 4 months in jail yet. 4 months.
And nobody there to give him a pardon now.
And when you're saying, normie Republican, I mean, he had a few of them, and we still had disastrous results.
That's what we did at the border. Had some people in there were trying to reel him in.
He had
have free
John
reign.
Kelly. He had John Kelly. He had Mattis. He had Tillerson. They retired instead of. They just was like, I'm done. I don't want to deal with him no more. I want somebody who's going to stay there and say, look, man, you can't do this, and you're not going to do it on my watch. But they all say, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, but he's just finished through all of them. Is my point. He knows.
Yeah, and he just let him. He still do whatever he want to do because they all left instead of dealing with him. You know what I mean? Like they said, Mad Dog Mattis was supposed to have been the man. He was the first one. Like, yeah, I'm getting out of here. Bill Barr.
Right, he's gonna have no guardrails this time if he goes.
It's okay if you go, because I understand being totally appalled and out of protest, almost leaving, but then do it loudly and publicly and say why you did that.
No, they got to get paid for it because they go write books. No? They got to go write books and tell their story and get paid for it. But the country is vulnerable when they do that because they got the inside. They know what he's doing from the inside. And then you leave. And then you put somebody like Mark Meadows in there that's going to finish carrying out what Trump wants done. That's the stuff that has always troubled me because you're putting the country at risk. We don't know what our enemies have on us at this point because those documents that man took, they probably know where every one of our nuclear arsenals are, where all of our nuclear weapons are. Like he sat there and talked about the 2 nuclear subs that we have, where they're positioned at and over there near North Korea. God only knows what they have access to because of him and what dangers we're really in. And if he were to get back in power, he would just finish us off. He would sell us off. We would become another arm of Russia.
Yeah. If he gets back in, that's bad news for all of us. And Trump was already able to do so much damage with those minimal guardrails that he had. And, you don't have to take our words for it. You can just listen to what Republicans say about themselves. And when they say these quiet parts out loud, believe them. Mm-hmm. When Trump says he's going to, use the Insurrection Act on day 1 if he makes it back into office, believe him. When he says these crazy things, believe him because he will do them. You know what I mean? I'm sick of people brushing it off like it's alarmist or it's exaggerated or it's not as big of a deal. No, believe him when he says these things because...
And I'm sure he would do just that. You just go to the polls. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And
but, okay. Do we have any closing comments, any last minute thoughts?
I do not.
All right, well... All right then, listeners, that does it for us this week. Thank you for tuning in and staying informed and being a part of our podcast community. You can follow us on social media, Spotify, and YouTube at @TheRealDeal_pod. Again, that's at @TheRealDeal_pod. Let us know your thoughts and questions because we want to hear them. Your questions keep this conversation going, and we really value your feedback. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Your engagement would really mean the world to us. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.